The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, releasing a breath of cool, recycled air that smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and expensive perfume. She stepped out alone, heels quiet against the polished floor, holding a slim leather folder close to her side. The office stretched wide before her, glass walls, brushed steel, open desks arranged with deliberate symmetry. Every detail screamed status, from the abstract art on the walls to the low murmur of confident voices that never seemed to doubt their place in the room. She paused for half a second, not from uncertainty, but to take in the rhythm of the space. People moved with purpose, coffee cups in hand, conversations clipped and efficient. No one smiled much. This was a place where smiles were currency, spent sparingly. She walked toward the empty workstation she'd been directed to earlier, near the windows overlooking the city. Sunlight poured in, bouncing off computer screens and chrome desk lamps. As she set her bag down, she felt it, that subtle shift in the air when attention lands on someone unexpectedly. A voice broke through the background noise. "Well, this is new." She didn't turn right away. She straightened a stack of onboarding papers, smoothing the edges, her movements calm and unhurried. Another voice, closer now. Louder. "Hey. You know you're on the executive floor, right?" She looked up. Across the aisle stood a man leaning back against a desk as if it belonged to him by default. His suit was perfectly tailored, his watch unmistakably expensive. He held a phone loosely in one hand, the screen dark, his attention fully on her. The look on his face wasn't curiosity. It was amusement sharpened into something meaner. "I was told to report here," she said evenly. He laughed, a short sound that carried farther than it needed to. A few nearby heads turned. Some faces showed interest. Others discomfort. "By who?" he asked. "Security?" A ripple of quiet laughter followed. Not loud enough to call out, not soft enough to ignore. She met his eyes without flinching. "By management." That only seemed to entertain him more. He straightened, adjusting his cuffs as if preparing for a performance. "Management doesn't usually forget to mention things like background," he said, eyes flicking over her clothes, her hair, her shoes. "This isn't customer service downstairs." The words landed exactly where he intended. Around them, keyboards slowed. Conversations thinned out. No one stepped in. She felt the heat of attention, the familiar weight of being watched, measured, reduced. She'd known this moment would come, had anticipated it, prepared for it, but knowing didn't make it any less heavy. "I don't think there's been a mistake," she replied. That confidence irritated him. It showed in the tightening of his jaw, the way his smile hardened. "Right," he said. "Because people like you always think they belong everywhere." The silence that followed was sharper than the insult. She inhaled once, slow and controlled. "Is there something work-related you need from me?" He stared at her for a moment, as if trying to decide whether to escalate or retreat. His ego chose for him. "I need you to understand how things work here," he said. "This place runs on standards." He turned away, heading toward the coffee station, dismissing her as if the conversation was already over. She watched him go, then returned her focus to her desk, opening her laptop, logging in with the credentials she'd been provided. Behind her, he continued talking, loudly. "HR's getting bold these days," he said to no one in particular. "Next thing you know, they'll be letting anyone sit in on strategy meetings." Someone muttered a half-hearted response. Someone else laughed again. She typed steadily, fingers precise, refusing to give him what he wanted. The hiss of a can opening cut through the air. He stood at the counter now, a chilled Coke in his hand, condensation already slicking the aluminum. He took a long sip, eyes still on her, as if daring her to look back. "Hey," he called. "You drink soda?" She turned slowly this time. "Excuse me?" He lifted the can slightly. "Just wondering if this is more your speed." A few people shifted uncomfortably. One woman near the printer glanced at her, then away, cheeks flushed with second-hand shame. She straightened. "I'd appreciate it if you spoke to me professionally." The word professional seemed to amuse him more than anything else she'd said. Professional? He echoed. You're lucky to even be here. He stepped closer, too close now, the sharp sweetness of soda mixing with his cologne. She could see the calculation in his eyes, the confidence that no one would stop him. You should learn your place before someone teaches you, he said. Something inside the room snapped, not loudly, but unmistakably. She opened her mouth to respond, but she never got the chance. His wrist flicked. The can tilted. The sound came first, a wet splash, the unmistakable slap of liquid against fabric. Cold soda burst across her blouse, soaking through in seconds, dripping down onto the floor. The shock of it stole the breath from her lungs, not because it hurt, but because it was deliberate. A collective gasp rose around them. The man laughed. Oh, my bad, he said, not sounding sorry at all. Guess it slipped. The laughter that followed was thin, uncertain, quickly dying when no one else joined in. She stood still, soda clinging to her skin, the chill seeping in. Her hands trembled once, just once, then stilled at her sides. The room held its breath. She looked down at the spreading stain, then back up at him. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm. Almost gentle. Did that make you feel powerful? The question landed harder than any shout. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Don't be dramatic. She reached for a napkin on the desk beside her, dabbing at her sleeve without breaking eye contact. This is a workplace, she said. What you just did says far more about you than it ever could about me. Before he could respond, footsteps approached from the far end of the floor, measured, purposeful. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Heads turned in unison. A presence entered the space, commanding attention without raising a voice. What's going on? The words were calm, but the authority behind them was absolute. The man froze. She straightened. The office went completely silent. The silence didn't break all at once. It fractured in pieces, chairs creaking as people shifted, the distant hum of the air conditioning suddenly too loud, the faint drip of soda hitting the floor like a ticking clock. Every eye stayed fixed on the end of the floor where the voice had come from. He stood there, jacket draped over one arm, sleeves rolled just enough to suggest he'd been working, not hiding behind an office door. His gaze moved quickly, taking in the scene with unsettling precision, the spilled drink, the damp fabric clinging to her blouse, the man standing far too close to her with a can still in his hand. What's going on? He asked again. The man recovered first. He straightened, clearing his throat, forcing a laugh that rang hollow in the quiet. Just a misunderstanding, he said. Nothing serious. The gaze shifted to him now. Cool. Unimpressed. A misunderstanding usually doesn't involve a soaked employee, the voice replied. She felt the weight of attention press down on her again, heavier this time. Not just curiosity now, expectation. People wanted a reaction. Tears. Anger. Something dramatic that would make them feel less uncomfortable. She gave them none of it. I'm fine, she said calmly. It was an accident. The man shot her a sharp look, surprised by her words, then smirked as if she'd just saved him. See? He said quickly. No harm done. But the calm presence at the end of the floor didn't relax. If anything, it sharpened. Was it? He asked, eyes still locked on the man. No one answered. The man shifted his weight. Look, if there's a problem, we can handle it internally. Internally is exactly how we're handling it, came the reply. You. My office. Now. The words landed like a verdict. A low murmur rippled through the room as the two of them walked away, disappearing behind frosted glass. The door closed softly, but the tension stayed behind, thick and unresolved. The moment they were gone, the office exhaled. Conversation started in whispers. Did you see that? He actually did it. I can't believe no one stopped him. She remained where she was, soda drying against her skin, the chill settling deeper now that the adrenaline was fading. Her hands moved automatically as she grabbed paper towels, blotting the fabric with careful motions. She refused to rush. Refused to look rattled. A woman approached her desk hesitantly, holding out more towels. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "That was wrong." She accepted them with a small nod. "Thank you." Others watched from a distance, guilt flickering across their faces. Some looked relieved they hadn't been involved. Others looked afraid of what this meant, of what might come next. As she cleaned herself up, fragments of conversation drifted through the air. "Who even is she? Why was he so angry? Did you see the way he spoke to him?" She kept her focus on the task at hand, even as her thoughts raced. This was the moment she'd expected resistance. She'd known there would be someone like him, someone who mistook dominance for authority, cruelty for confidence. What surprised her wasn't his behavior. It was how predictable it felt. The door to the office remained closed. Minutes passed. 10. 15. The man's laughter echoed faintly through the glass once, then stopped abruptly. After that, nothing. Speculation grew. "He's in trouble," someone murmured. "No one gets called in like that unless it's serious." She finally stood and excused herself to the restroom, the murmurs following her like shadows. In the mirror, she studied herself carefully. The stain was still visible, but she didn't try to hide it. She adjusted her blazer, straightened her posture, and took a steady breath. When she returned, the atmosphere had changed again. People avoided eye contact now. Desks felt farther apart. The confidence that had filled the room earlier had thinned, replaced by unease. Power dynamics were shifting, and everyone could feel it. The door opened. The man emerged first. He looked smaller somehow. His shoulders sagged, his face pale, the swagger stripped clean away. He didn't look at anyone as he passed, heading straight for his desk to grab his things under the watchful eyes of security who had appeared without announcement. Whispers followed him like a wake. Behind him, the calm presence stepped out next, scanning the floor until his eyes found her. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly now. She met his gaze, unflinching. "I am." Something passed between them then, recognition, respect, something deeper than the situation unfolding around them. It didn't go unnoticed. He nodded once. "Good." Then he turned to the room. "I want everyone's attention." The floor went silent instantly. "What happened here today," he said, "is unacceptable. This company does not tolerate behavior rooted in disrespect or entitlement." The man flinched as if struck, but the words kept coming. "Professionalism is not optional. Dignity is not conditional." He paused, letting that sink in. "There will be consequences," he continued. "And there will be changes." Eyes flicked toward her again. Questions burned behind them now, sharper than before. Who was she? Why did he speak to her like that? She felt the moment tightening, the truth pressing closer to the surface. She knew what came next would change how they looked at her forever. But not yet. The calm presence glanced at her once more, just long enough for a silent understanding to pass between them. Then he said, "We'll continue this shortly." And with that, the suspense settled in, heavy, inevitable, and impossible to ignore. The rest of the morning moved as if the building itself had lost its balance. Conversation stayed low, clipped. Keyboards clicked with nervous urgency. People checked their phones more often than usual, pretending to work while replaying the moment over and over in their heads. The stain on her blouse had dried, faint but still visible, and she made no effort to conceal it. It was there as a quiet reminder, and she let it be. She worked. Not tentatively. Not cautiously. She opened reports, reviewed data, made notes in the margins with a precision that spoke of familiarity, not guesswork. Anyone paying close attention would have noticed how quickly she understood systems others struggled with, how her questions, when she asked them, cut straight to the core of issues that had stalled projects for months. A few people did notice. One man 2 desks over glanced at her screen by accident and froze. The financial model displayed there wasn't something a new hire should have been navigating so easily. He looked again, then looked away, unease settling into his posture. The door to the office opened again, But this time there was no announcement, no commanding pause. Just movement. Security returned quietly, escorting the man out for good. He didn't protest. He didn't speak. His eyes never lifted from the floor. The confidence that had fueled him earlier was gone entirely, replaced by something smaller and far more fragile. As he passed her desk, their eyes met for the briefest second. She didn't smile. She didn't glare. She simply watched him go, her expression unreadable. That, more than anything else, seemed to break him. The rest of the floor pretended not to see. Hours later, a meeting invitation appeared on screens across the executive floor. Mandatory. Immediate. The conference room filled quickly, chairs scraping softly as people took their seats. She arrived last, unhurried, choosing a place near the center of the table. When he entered, the room stood instinctively, then sat just as quickly. He didn't waste time. What happened today exposed more than one problem, he began. Not just behavior, but assumptions. Eyes lowered. Some people shifted uncomfortably. There's a reason she's here, he continued, gesturing toward her. And before anyone speaks out of turn again, you're going to understand that reason. The tension in the room sharpened. She felt it coiling, waiting. He nodded to her. She stood. For the first time since stepping onto the floor that morning, every single person looked directly at her, not with dismissal, not with curiosity, but with attention. I didn't come here to be protected, she said calmly. I came here to work. Her voice was steady, unshaken by the weight of the room. I knew there would be resistance, she continued. I didn't expect it to be subtle. It never is. A few people swallowed hard. This company is strong, she said, but it has blind spots. Places where comfort has been mistaken for competence. Where familiarity has been rewarded over integrity. She reached into her folder and slid several documents onto the table. These are projections from the last 3 quarters, she said. And these are the risks no one addressed. Screens lit up as the files were shared. Silence followed, not because people didn't understand, but because they did. Someone finally spoke. How did you? I've been doing this for a long time, she replied simply. In rooms bigger than this one. With stakes far higher. She paused, letting the truth of that settle. You didn't know who I was, she said. And that was the point. The man at the head of the table watched her with something close to pride, but he said nothing. This was hers. I wanted to see how power was exercised when it thought it wasn't being observed, she went on. How respect was given, or withheld, based on appearance alone. A murmur moved through the room. And today, she said, eyes sweeping across the faces before her. Someone answered that question very clearly. No one argued. She sat down slowly, folding her hands in front of her. The man at the head of the table finally spoke again. She's not here because of me, he said. She's here because she's the best person for this role. That was when the realization began to spread, not like a shock, but like a cold tide pulling back to reveal something vast and unavoidable. Whispers followed the meeting as people filed out. She didn't flinch once. Did you see those numbers? She let him destroy himself. Back at her desk, the atmosphere around her had shifted completely. People approached now with measured respect, questions framed carefully, apologies offered quietly. I should have said something earlier, one person admitted. She nodded. You can say something next time. By late afternoon, the story had spread beyond the floor. Emails circulated. HR notices followed. The building hummed with the low vibration of change. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the office, she gathered her things. He met her by the elevator, his expression softer now that the day's reckoning was nearly complete. You didn't have to endure that, he said quietly. I chose to, she replied. Because now they'll listen. The elevator doors opened. As they stepped inside, the office behind them buzzed with a new awareness, one forged not by anger or spectacle, but by the unmistakable realization that power had been standing among them all along, quietly taking notes. And tomorrow, everything would be different. The next morning, the building felt different before anyone said a word. It wasn't quieter. If anything, there was more movement, more conversation, but the tone had shifted. Confidence no longer filled the air unchecked. It paused, recalibrated, waited to see where it was permitted. She arrived at the same time as the day before, walking through the lobby with the same measured pace, the same calm presence. This time, heads turned openly. Not out of suspicion. Out of recognition. Doors were held. Greetings offered. Eyes met hers and didn't slide away. She acknowledged none of it beyond a polite nod. Respect that came from revelation rather than character was still respect, but it wasn't what she'd come for. Upstairs, the executive floor buzzed with restrained anticipation. HR representatives moved between offices. Managers whispered behind glass walls. The empty desk where he once stood had already been cleared, his absence conspicuous in a way his presence never had been. Mid-morning, a company-wide meeting was called. Every floor tuned in. Screens lit up across conference rooms, break areas, individual workstations. The image settled on him standing at the podium, composed, unmistakably in control. She stood a few steps behind, visible but not centered. He didn't preface his words. Yesterday, he said, a line was crossed. The room, every room, stilled. What happened was not a misunderstanding. It was not a lapse in judgment. It was a reflection of an attitude that should never have survived here as long as it did. No euphemisms. No softening. There are consequences for actions, he continued. And there are consequences for silence. People shifted uncomfortably at that. They were meant to. The individual responsible is no longer employed by this company, he said. Effective immediately. No gas this time. Everyone already knew. But accountability doesn't stop there, he went on. We are implementing changes, real ones. Mandatory training. Structural reviews. Leadership evaluations. He paused, then turned slightly toward her. And I want to be very clear about something else. The cameras adjusted automatically, bringing her into focus. She did not come here to prove anything, he said. She does not need protection, explanation, or justification. She stepped forward then, just one step, but it felt like a shift in gravity. I don't want apologies, she said calmly. They're easy. They fade. Her voice carried effortlessly through speakers and screens. What I want is awareness, she continued. The kind that stays with you when no one important is watching. She looked directly into the camera, as if seeing each person individually. I was treated the way I was treated because someone believed power belonged to them by default, she said. Because they believed their comfort mattered more than my dignity. A quiet settled over the building. That belief doesn't disappear when one person is fired, she said. It disappears when everyone understands their responsibility to challenge it. She stepped back. The broadcast ended without applause. None was needed. The rest of the day unfolded with purpose. Meetings ran differently. Voices that had once dominated rooms now waited their turn. Questions were asked instead of assumptions made. People listened, truly listened, for the first time in a long while. Late in the afternoon, she was called into a smaller conference room. The table was bare. Sunlight streamed in through the windows, warm and honest. He stood when she entered. They're shaken, he said. They should be, she replied. A faint smile touched his lips. You were extraordinary. She shrugged lightly. I was myself. They sat across from each other, no desk between them now, no hierarchy to perform. Do you regret it? He asked. Letting it go as far as it did? She considered the question carefully. No, she said. Because if it hadn't happened publicly, it would have happened quietly. And quiet injustices last longer. He nodded, understanding settling into his expression. By the time the workday ended, the story had spread far beyond the building. It moved through conversations, messages, hushed retellings. But the details shifted with each telling. The Coke became symbolic. The insults secondary. What lingered was the composure. The restraint. The refusal to shrink. As she packed up to leave, someone approached her desk, a junior employee, nervous but determined. "I just wanted to say," the woman began, then stopped, searching for words. "Seeing you stand there, it mattered." She met her eyes. "Then it was worth it." Outside, the city glowed with evening light, traffic humming below like a living thing. They walked side by side toward the car, the day's weight finally lifting. "You changed this place," he said quietly. She shook her head. "I showed it a mirror." They drove home in comfortable silence. Days later, the ripple effects were still unfolding. Policies rewritten. Leaders reassessed. Conversations continued long after meetings ended. People thought twice before speaking once. And somewhere in that shift, something lasting took root. Not fear. Respect. She never mentioned the Coke again. Never referenced the humiliation. She didn't need to. Because the lesson wasn't in the act, it was in the response. And the building remembered that long after the stain on her blouse had faded.